Hey, moneymakers, welcome to another episode of Taking Stock Live. I'm Kalila, and we're bringing you all the latest money news and telling you how it will affect you and your money. So tonight, we're talking all things Kingston Wharves. This is an interview we've been trying to get for months now, and we finally have it. We finally get to see what's going on at the wharf, what the opportunities are, and what's going on in that entire industry. As you know, logistics is huge. And then later on in the Analysts, we're going to be talking about main events and, of course, those oil prices. You've seen it going high and then dipping and then going back up. What's going on with oil prices and how does that affect you and your money here locally and around the Caribbean? But before we start, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and share with a friend. Let them know that Taking Stock is on and live and that we are where the Caribbean comes to talk business. Also, let me know in the chat what part of Jamaica or what part of the world are you joining us from. Now, come on, let's get this money.
But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Woodcats International officially listed on junior market of the Jamaica Stock Exchange today, March 17. The IPO was oversubscribed and closed on February 12. The company was offering 833 million shares valued at 90 cents each to raise just under $750 million. According to Woodcats, the funds will be used to purchase new machinery and expand production capacity. Regency Petroleum is expanding beyond fuel and moving into road repair materials. The company plans to invest between 35 and 40 million Jamaican dollars to produce and distribute a new asphalt filler. They've partnered with the US-based Quality Pavement Repair to introduce the product locally. RPL said the move is part of its effort to diversify the business and rely less on petroleum products. The asphalt mix can be used in wet or dry conditions, does not require heating, and allows roads to reopen right after it's compacted. Regency said local production should begin within the next 3 months. Clarendon and St. Catherine are being considered as the first sites. Grace Kennedy has taken full ownership of Dairy Industries Jamaica, the company behind Tasty Cheese. According to GK's latest financial statements, they paid just over 3 billion Jamaican dollars to buy the remaining 50% stake from New Zealand dairy giant Fonterra Cooperative Group. Grace Kennedy and Fonterra had operated Dairy Industries Jamaica as a 50-50 joint venture since 1996. The deal was announced in December and completed in January. It values the cheesemaker at about 6.3 billion Jamaican dollars, or roughly 40 million US. The Jamaica Business Development Corporation, JBDC, has launched a new online learning platform aimed at helping small businesses build their skills. The agency said BizWiz is designed to give micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises across the island more training opportunities. The program offers 7 structured courses covering areas like product development, marketing, financial management, and digital transformation. The courses are meant to take users from basic business knowledge to more advanced digital skills. The JBDC BizWiz platform is accessible at jbdcbizwiz.com. Now, YouTube has been named the world's largest media company after beating Disney in revenue last year. According to research firm MoffettNathanson, the video streaming platform owned by Alphabet brought in about 62 billion USD in revenue in 2025. That puts it just ahead of Disney's media businesses, which generated about 60.9 billion US. The comparison excludes revenue from Disney's theme parks and cruise operations. YouTube has also been leading in audience share. Data from Nielsen shows the platform topped its distributor index for 11 straight months, with about 12.5% of the total audience among major media companies. Now that's What's Hot. What's Hot in Business was brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart. And you can scan the QR code on the screen to get started today. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
What's Hot was brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Are you living on or in possession of family land? Do you want to sell or subdivide the property? Use eLand Jamaica to search for details on the property. You can complete a title search and verify the owner before you sell the property. If your name does not appear on the title, register the land or clarify the existing title in your name before you sell. A title is a notice to the world of your ownership of land. For more information, contact the National Land Agency at 876-750-5263 or 876-946-5263. The National Land Agency, one agency, one goal to serve you better.
Welcome back. Let's see who's joining us in the chat this evening. We've got quite a few people on. King Slim Shady was waiting from 7:30. Wow, half an hour early. Nana Sense was there from far, far away, right around that time as well. Who else we have? Antoinette says, good night, waiting patiently for electricity in dark, Linsdale, Black River, St. Elizabeth. Oh my goodness. It's been months. Still no power for you. Among the 1% today, JPS truck was seen in the community. There may be a glimmer of hope for us. So we're wishing you all the best, hopefully for real. Unbothered Chico says, what a day on the JSC. Woodcats making rounds on its first day listing. Okay. Travis is checking in from Florida. We've got Dwight from Spanish Town in the house. Raquel says, Woodcats are on the board. Is this the next TJH? Okay. Raquel says, St. Patrick's Day, they will have the luck of the Irish cleaning, saying greetings to the money makers. Ingrid saying good night as well, checking in from Bull Bay, St. Andrew. We've got Javon saying good night. Proactive investors, I hope we're all focusing on the emergency fund money as there's so many possibilities to prepare for right now. And Oddly says, love the way how Woodcat's pushing, but let's see how well this will pump for the next 3 months. We've got two more. Lanesra checking in from Cool Portmore and Anna K. Wait, should I say cool Portmore? That is something that we don't often hear. So happy that you're getting a nice little breeze in Portmore this evening. And then we've got Anna K checking in from Flankers in Montego Bay. So let me know in the comments what part of Jamaica, what part of the world you are joining us from. So Kingston Wharves is a major player in Jamaica's logistics industry. Some would say the major player. We've never had them on the show before. It's 7 years we've been doing Taking Stock, and our first time getting Kingston Wharves on. And they just released their audited year-end results, their audited year-end financials. So this feels like very good timing. Joining us now is CEO of Kingston Wharves. We've got Mark Williams. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Kalila. I can't believe it has been 7 years you have been waiting, but there's no time like this.
Patiently waiting.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for your invitation.
So let's jump right into the numbers, Mark, because according to your audited year-end financials, revenue was up 18%, which is good, to about $13 billion. And profits also jumped pretty strongly too. What really drove that performance in 2025?
Thank you, Kalila, and good evening to your viewers. It's a combination of a couple of things. Primarily, we would have seen large increases in our cargo volumes. For example, Kingston Wharves provide stevedoring services to 5 of the world's largest car carriers. We would have seen an increase in the movement of cars to over 180,000 car movements. What that means for us is that Kingston Wharves move motor units across the globe, over 45 countries globally. So we would have seen increases in our car movement, in container, and or bulk and break bulk in our logistics business. And also just good, strong productivity management and cost management. And therefore, we had an extraordinary year in terms of revenue and over 30% growth in our profit.
All right, so I think I'm having a little bit of internet problems, but when you look at that 30+% of increase in net profit, was that more about higher cargo volumes, Mark, or was it just better efficiency or just better pricing, improved pricing across the business?
It's a combination of, you know, very good solid movement in cargo volumes and aggressively managing our productivity, managing our cost. So it's a good combination, but primarily our business at Kingston Wharves continues to grow and the volume in our cargo activities continues to grow.
When we disaggregate the numbers quarter by quarter, the Q3 numbers really stand out. So what was going on in Q3?
Again, you know, our volumes continue to grow. What we would have seen in Q3, what we consider to be our bulk cargo, your salt that you eat, your grains, your edible oil. On the other construction side, construction business in Jamaica, we've seen an increase, an uptick, and therefore the volumes in that part of the business continue to grow. And then we would have seen a real solid increase in Q3 and therefore reflected in the numbers.
Volumes. Are there particular industries that you notice are growing? When you say volumes, where is the volume coming from?
Oh, sure. So much of what we do at Kingston Wharves, we are a global player in specific areas. So if I go back to our motor car business, as I said, we move cargo to over 45 countries. So while you would see an increase in cars on the domestic road, 80% of the business that we do in motor units don't stay in Kingston. They're the 7 continents, they're all over the world. So we would have seen a big increase as we continue to invest in our business, as we continue to invest in technology and the infrastructure. Kingston Wharves has now become and continue to become a real global player, and therefore large shipping lines are seeing the opportunities to work with Kingston Wharves, and therefore the volume increases.
Did you said cars were a big one?
Cars, motor cars, trucks, heavy equipment. As I said, we move heavy units as far away to Australia, to New Zealand. Your Jamaican company, Kingston Wharves, is really a big player on the global scene.
You know, that's very interesting. I didn't expect you to say cars. I thought you would say, okay, Hurricane Melissa, and so a lot of stuff is coming in for post-hurricane recovery. But cars, so Jamaicans are importing a lot more motor vehicles. I wonder what's behind that. Is it that, well, I don't know what your observation is. Is it lower price point cars? Is it all the Chinese cars coming in?
No, Khalili, so let me clarify for you and your listeners. The motor vehicle business in Kingston Wharves, 80% of what we do, those cars do not stay in Jamaica.
Ah.
Those cars are transshipped. So what I'm saying is that Kingston, Jamaica, is becoming more and more a global player in the transshipment of motor cars.
Ah, so we're becoming the logistics hub that was envisioned years ago.
We're on our way, and you know, Kingston Wharves has been at the forefront of that. To be a global logistics significant player, it requires huge capital investment. It requires to have very competent and a skilled labor force. It requires technology. As you can imagine, if you're moving 180,000 cars, you require technology to track those cars, to ensure that, you know, the 2,000 cars that need to go to Panama don't end up in Suriname, that the 500 cars or trucks that must be in New Zealand don't end up in Australia. So it's a lot of investment and training, skills training, competence development taking place at Kingston Wharves.
You know, this is really impressive and really encouraging. I remember when the whole logistics hub idea was touted, there are a lot of people who laughed at it and basically said we can't compete with the Panamas and the others who are on the list. But from what you described, we're on the way. We're not there yet, but we are strategically located when it comes to global commerce.
We are. Are we perfect? No, we are not. But the infrastructure beginning to take root. What the government is doing, for logistics, it requires, good customs regulations. And I just take a moment to give a shout out to the Jamaica Customs Agency, led by Velma Ricketts Walcott. Did a wonderful job. So you're required to have good banking infrastructure, good legal infrastructure, because the logistics business is a global business. And therefore, there are several infrastructure and policies and regulations that are required to be in place for you to compete globally. And I'm very pleased to say that Kingston Wharves continues to be at the forefront of Jamaica's logistics initiatives.
Now, even though you had a lot of growth last year, which is commendable, your expenses also rose. So your cost of sales, your admin expenses. So how are you managing those pressures while still improving your profitability?
Well, certainly, if you were to ask me what keep me up at night, the cost. But what we're doing, we continue to drive improvement in productivity because that is key. We continue to drive technology in our business to bring down the cost. We're very focused on what we call structural cost reduction. We want to ensure that we maintain our unit margin, that we are very focused in ensuring that we're not leaving money on the table. But we're mindful that natural part of business is your constant inflationary escalation. And therefore, as I said, productivity improvement, technology, structural cost reduction. We are very focused on those things.
Inflation really licks us all. Past couple of years, it has not been easy dealing with inflation. Now, looking at your growth trajectory, a part of that has been acquisition of a stake in cargo handlers. You acquired 27% for about $1.1 billion. What was the strategic thinking behind that?
Well, it's part of KW's vision and our strategy to expand our business regionally. And we would have seen that cargo handlers was a good strategic fit that certainly adds value to what we do. And we're very pleased with this stake that we have in cargo handlers so far. And we expect that we'll continue to reap good strategic benefit from that acquisition, so to speak.
How are the two businesses different? Because I kind of feel like it's two very similar businesses. So how does one feed into the other?
They are pretty similar. We're both involved in logistics and in port operations. But KW sees itself as a company that will continue to launch out in the Caribbean. And then we see cargo handlers with their strengths on the northern coast of Jamaica to complement Kingston Wharves' predominant presence in Kingston. And therefore, it's just a natural fit in part of our strategic growth and direction.
So when it comes to cargo handlers, though, you have said that it's more of a partnership than a takeover. So what would you say success looks like with cargo handlers over the next few years?
Interesting. For us, success certainly look like having greater operational synergies, greater efficiency in what we do, creating greater value through partnership rather than a takeover. It's not about a takeover. It's about building partnership that will create value and synergy for both companies.
You have the option. So right now you're at 27% in cargo handlers. You have the option to increase that to 40%. Is that something that you are or will be actively pursuing? Or kind of just see how it goes for right now?
Interesting. Well, we're going to be very disciplined about the next step. We do have the option. We have a period. We're considering it. Once we believe that moving from 27 to 40 will create greater value for our shareholders, we will do it. But for now, we're very disciplined and just, working with Mark Hart and the team and cargo handlers. But we'll get there. You'll be the first to know, I promise you.
I mentioned Hurricane Melissa not long ago, and I remember shortly after Melissa, we had a lot of reports about the backlogs at the wharves. And even before Melissa, from time to time, we hear all these reports about, there being this massive backlog at the wharf and, people just being really, really frustrated with what's going on there. So are things fully cleared up now? What's the situation now at the wharf?
Right. So certainly for the last quarter, certainly immediately after Melissa, we had a perfect storm, pun on words there. Clearly there was a major hurricane. That would have coincided with the natural peak period for commercial business to stock up and for individuals to get their Christmas. And therefore what happened is that because of Hurricane Melissa, commercial cargo continued to move. There was no issue with commercial cargo. Where we had the problem would have been, what we commonly term as the barrel business. The diaspora responding so positively to sending stuff. But the challenge, Kalila and viewers, is that people weren't coming to clear the cargo. Now, Kingston Wharves has in excess of over 300,000 square feet of warehouse space. Combined with all the other warehouses in Jamaica, we are still the largest. And therefore, because persons weren't coming to receive the cargo, it created some, backlog. We would have added, increased number of shifts, increased personnel just to clear the cargo. I'm very pleased to report that we have seen the worst of that has passed, and we're back to normalcy, and cargo continues to move through the ports.
Back to normalcy. Well, definitely happy to hear that. So the frustration has been eased, and so people are clearing their barrels now.
The government continues to offer special discounts for Hurricane Melissa cargo, and as people begin to get back to normal, get their roof back on, etc., they can now come and clear their cargo. And that's what's happening. We had extended opening hours. We went up to midnight during the week. We open on Saturdays, which typically don't happen, but Kingston Wharves did that for about 2 months. And therefore, our job at KW is to ensure that we keep cargo moving. And as I said, I'm very pleased to say that we're back to normal.
Now, globally, so we're looking at the situation locally, but globally, there is a lot going on. There's a lot of tension, conflicts, shipping disruptions. We're hearing the Strait of Hormuz because of Iran, and so much stuff is going on with shifting trade routes. How are all of those pressures affecting your business on a day-to-day basis, if at all?
Right. Given our position in global shipping, we are affected. We continue to see, cost volatility. We continue to see, disruption in shipping pattern. But what is good about Kingston Wharves is the diversified nature of our offering. As I said, we're a multi-purpose terminal, and therefore we're not dependent on just one cargo type. And as you and your viewers know, we also, apart from the terminal, we have a very well-invested logistics business. So while the headwinds are there and we are affected, for now we're managing very well because of the diversified nature of the offering that we provide at Kingston Wharves.
So in other words, not too much affected.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Good to know. Right now, this week, we have the national debates going on. It started last week. What are you paying closest attention to right now in the business environment? Are you listening out for anything in particular from a policy level?
Most definitely. So, myself and certainly management team at Kingston was, we're very focused on anything to do with, policy that affect trade, any position that affects infrastructure. As I said, when you think of a logistics hub, it's not just a port. It has to do with the overall infrastructure. So policy to do with trade, anything to do with infrastructure, and certainly anything that will substantially affect our operating cost. And in terminal business and in logistics business, the margins are very small, and therefore we need to be very focused on our operating cost. So those are the things that we're keeping an eye on.
I have a couple of questions from our audience. Audley wants to know, are there any talks about publishing an APO for KWL?
Not right now, not immediately, but everything is on the table, but certainly no, not now. Kingston Wharves, if you look at the numbers of our balance sheet, we're a well-invested company. We move our asset from $60 billion to $66 billion. We are strong cash. We have strong cash based on some plans that we have. So right now we are okay for now. So no APO for now.
And then Travis has a question. What is put in place to stop the loss of goods from the barrels? This was a hot topic a couple of months ago.
Well, what I can tell you is that as a port, the security infrastructure at the port is first class. Is it perfect? No, it's not. There are several players involved in the ecosystem of moving a barrel. Most times people think it's just the warehouse operator, but you have Jamaica Customs, you have the Port Authority, you have external brokers and freight forwarders. What I can tell Travis is that the security infrastructure continues to be upgraded, continue to be very robust. It's very difficult, I'm telling you, for someone to lose something from a barrel. It happens, but it is very difficult. And we continue to work with business partners to ensure that doesn't happen as it used to.
As we wrap up, Mark, what do you see as the biggest opportunities right now for Kingston Wharves, and what are also the biggest risks for your company and for logistics?
Kingston Wharves continue to be very opportunistic for any good business venture. Opportunity for us is regional expansion and regional integration. The risk certainly is continued disruption in global supply chains. That will continue to be a challenge for us, but we're keeping our eyes on those different balls to ensure that we have a robust plan in place and we continue to grow shareholders' value.
And for the risks?
Risk and disruption in supply chains continue. There's a war going on, apparently every week there's another war. And so the risk is really disruption in global supply chains.
Okay, I'll take one more question from the audience. This one from Lanesra. Apart from the automotive transportation hub business line, what other areas do you see great potential for growth?
Logistics. We have some large global players in logistics, international players, and we continue to focus on growing that business. So what we do, it's not just having a warehouse. We're into pick and pack and assembling and labeling and kitting. Logistics is certainly the way that KWL sees its future continues to expand and bring more profit to our shareholders.
It really is a huge global opportunity that can transform not just your company, but all of Jamaica. The ripple effects are so great. Thank you so much for joining us, finally.
You're most welcome. I won't be a stranger next time, I promise.
Yes, good. My pleasure to finally have you on, Mark Williams, CEO of Kingston Wharves. There's still a lot more to come in tonight's show, but first, let's take our poll question of the evening. So, how do you feel now that Woodcats International has officially listed on the junior market? I saw a lot of you commenting on it already, their first day performance. We'll talk about it in the Analysts up next. But how do you feel Now, Woodcats has officially listed on the junior market. Here are your options. A, great. Let's see what the price does. B, I need to get my hands on some shares. C, I hope they don't disappoint. Or D, other, leave a comment. How do you feel that Woodcats has officially listed on the junior market? Great. Let's see what the price does. B, need to get my hands on some shares. C, I hope they don't disappoint. Or other, leave a comment. You can take that poll over on the community tab here on YouTube. You can take it on X. You can take it in tomorrow morning's email. Subscribe at getmoneynews.com, or you can just leave a comment in the chat and let us know how you feel. Up next, we've got your market recap, and the analysts are standing by. Time now for your market recap, brought to you by mymoneyja.com, the official data partner of Money Media. Get 10% off your subscription with the code MONEYMISSION. The JSE Combined Index gained 1,900 points last week. That's about 0.5%. 127 stocks traded across the main and junior markets for the week ending Friday, March 13, 2026. 50 made gains, 68 lost value, and 9 stayed the same. 108 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, valued at $985 million. Kintyre was the week's most traded stock, with 21 million shares changing hands. It opened the new week at 39 cents. Transjam lost 1 cent to start Monday at $6.97. And Fesco rounded out last week's most traded stocks, with 10 million shares changing hands. Now let's see who had the biggest gains. Fesco was the top stock last week. It opened Monday up 27.5%. PBS USD gained 24% to start the new week at $1.24, and Paramount Trading started Monday at $1.17, up 12.5%. On the losing side now, First Rock Real Estate was the week's biggest loser, down 21%. It started the week at $7.12. 138 Student Living Variable Preference lost 20% to start Monday at $194.07. And Margaritaville Turks lost 17%. Over on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the composite was mostly flat last week. Guardian Holdings was the TTSE's most traded stock. The price was unchanged and opened Monday at $14.75 TT. Trinidad and Tobago NGL was the TTSE's top gainer, up 39%. Unilever Caribbean fell 7% to open Monday at $13.03 TT. Over in the U.S., the Dow Jones fell about 2% last week, while the S&P 500 and NASDAQ lost around 1.5%. At the pumps, gas and diesel prices both rose by $4.50 last week. In foreign exchange trading, it took an average $158.16 Jamaican to purchase $1 last Friday. That's 68 cents more than the week before. $1 Canadian cost an average $116.99 Jamaican. $1 British pound cost $211.95 Jamaican, and you could buy €1 for $183.80 Jamaican on average. Finally, on the crypto markets, Bitcoin prices climbed 5% over the last 5 days, trading at $73,796 on Monday. Meanwhile, Ethereum was up 11%, trading at $2,282 on Monday. Market Recap was brought to you by MyMoneyJA, the official data partner of Money Media. Subscribe to my newsletter for money news like this straight to your inbox. Go to getmoneynews.com to sign up. The link is in my bio. Let's get this money.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analyst, is brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
The views expressed in this segment are not necessarily the views of Money Media. This information is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Welcome back. Let's take some of your comments before we introduce our analyst panel. Let's see what we've got here. Alyssa says, yes, I just started a logistics business in the States looking to expand to Jamaica. I have a comment here from Nanosense, but I'll take this at the end of the show. We want to discuss this issue with the NIR. Amazon says this man sounds like he should be a minister. Davion says KW goes well with Woodcats International. True, that's a good pairing. Amazon says, of course, more cargo, more money, more jobs. Philip says logistics is an excellent high growth business driven by the booming e-commerce market, increasing global trade, and high demand for supply chain efficiency. Ezekiel says when people bring in cargo without license, they should be considerate when they make mistakes. Oddly says Kingston Wharves was first listed on September 26, 1995 at $2.24 JMD per share. As of March 17, 2026, it's still actively traded at around 36 JMD per share, meaning it has been listed. Alyssa saying, great show. Thanks, Alyssa. And Travis wanted to know, with all that expansion, what job opportunities are there for Jamaicans? Quite a bit. It's quite a lot. We did have some responses to the poll question. Where are those responses? All right, if anything, I find them later. For right now, let's introduce our analyst panel. We've got Taking Stock analyst David Rose, as well as equity trader at JMMB, Clive Charlton. Welcome back, David. Welcome back, Clive.
Thanks. Hi, Hayeda. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. And before we get into our topics for this evening, just a quick update on Woodcats. I saw a lot of you commenting on Woodcats' first day as an officially listed company. Woodcats closed the day up 12%, so not bad for its first day. Started at 90 cents and it ended today at $1.01. So 12% rise in its first day listed. Congratulations to the Woodcats team and to those of you who made a little profit on your very first day of trading Woodcats. So David, tonight we're going to start with you. We haven't spoken on Main Event in quite some time. Their Q1 results for the quarter ending January 31 are now out. What are the highlights from that?
So to keep it short and simple, it was a pretty tough quarter. So Main Event's first quarter runs from November to January. And we know that during that period, in the case of Main Event, in the situation for Main Event, it would have been Christmas plus the expected start of New Year parties, but companies were focused on, supporting the West, cutting expenses, based on the disruption to the different segments of the economy. So as a result, you saw Main Event highlight that their revenue went down by 64%. So they did $595 million, $5 million in the prior year. They did $211 million this year in terms of revenue. And then they went to net profit of $73 million to a net loss of $65 million. So that's to kind of show you how significant this disruption in the economy has been to Main Event. And for those who don't know, Main Event is a promotions company. So I'm not going to necessarily reference Ramesh, but to oversimplify, for those persons or individuals who attended the Jamaica Coffee and Food Drink Festival, did you see that big light board at the back where the MC and other personalities were, doing their events? So that big light stage, at the back, that was Main Event set up. Yeah, the persons who were handling the sound was Main Event. But Chronics' Lost in Time Festival recently, they were handling a lot of the logistics in terms of sound and other promotional elements. They also, set up the style and design of certain weddings. They have the digital signage business. So their specialty is events. So in this case, the company points out that in December, it's usually a very busy period. So as companies were saying, hey, we're not having this event this year, we're not having that event next year, it was just pretty tough. And earlier today, also the Main Event, Stationery Office Supplies Limited would have published their audited numbers and their brief on their full year results. And they pointed out that in Montego Bay, their warehouse, Montego Bay was, all the stock in the warehouse was totally destroyed. In this pharma, from our distributor base in Montego Bay, their quarterly numbers are also delayed. So, the companies that are showing their results up to January are showing a lot more of the true impact, as you would say, coming out of the Hurricane Melissa experience.
David, sorry if I ask you something that you already mentioned, because I'm having some internet problems. I really need to start this out tomorrow, because it's not the first week I've been having these problems. But we did see Main Events leaning into having their own events a lot in the past year. So that has been part of the strategy. Is that a sustainable strategy in your opinion?
So to put it in another perspective, Main Event is trying to move up the value chain and see how best they can position themselves in a different market segment rather than just being exposed to their traditional, go set up and collect payments. So for the most recent reporting period, should have been the October 2025 financial year, based on the revenue vis-a-vis expenses for their proprietary and joint venture events. They did not break even, but at the same time, it does show that the company has potential to build up this niche, which can become their own proprietary intellectual property brands, which they can leverage to, attract future business. So I wouldn't say it's not sustainable, but it's what I call a necessary pivot to diversify outside of their standard core business, because prior to COVID, Main Event had this segment called M Academy, where they're training persons in sound production, digital signage management, and other technical specialties of their trade. I don't know what's happening with that business right now or that division, but for the company to move to proprietary events at the Jamaica car and automotive show last year, it really makes sense.
And based on these results, David, would you say that Main Events is in a kind of a rebuilding stage, or should investors expect a stronger return going forward?
So it comes down to a better want of seeing how the economy progresses and the available spending power of promoters and companies, because for some fest this year, it's going to be in St. Anne and it's going to be only one night vis-a-vis the usual 2 or 3 nights that we're traditionally used to. So events are being hosted in the interim period, you're potentially going to see a shorter duration period and companies trying to be more strategic about bank for buck. So I wouldn't say a rebuilding phase, but I just call it a transitionary phase, because right now events are going to continue happening, but it's more so just, for a better want of saying, it's going to be a slow climb back up, because they've established themselves, if you take out the Melissa impact, if you remove the joint venture and the proprietary event expense and revenue from last year, they're profitable. They, delivered and showed what they can do. And one thing I have to respect Solomon and the team for, Solomon and Richard to be specific, because they're the co-founders, is they've always been disciplined about preparing for the storms. So when COVID happened, Main Event, just everything went out the door. So when there are these recovery times, Main Event stocked up a lot of cash and a lot of short-term deposits. So the company at the end of January had $250 million worth of short-term deposits and $97 million worth of cash. And they're basically debt-free come next quarter. So they're collecting receivables, or they're a stable amount of cash on hand, and they're starting to do more events in Kingston as they come along. So they're in a better position to weather this disruptive period without becoming under any significant strain. So
it makes sense. COVID was a hard lesson to learn, so I could see why they would take that strategy coming out of that period. Clive, we want to look internationally and talk about what's going on globally and how it affects us here in Jamaica and the Caribbean. So we know that the war with Iran is impacting gas prices. We've seen it doing all kinds of things over the past couple of weeks. What effect would this have on the local stock market, if any?
likely will. Interestingly, what we've learned over the last number of years is that the world is more interconnected than we thought. And some obscure product, for example, wheat, soybean, we thought they were grown in America, US, but now we learned over the last 3 years that between Russia and Ukraine, upward of 15 to 75% of some major commodities that are used into significant production of other goods, are produced in these areas. Now, of course, energy, 20% of sea-based oil moves through the Strait of Hormuz, that area. But I was reading a report that upward of 30% of oil moves through that general area, the Middle Eastern area, over 30% global supply. That's significant. That's another 10 percentage points jump. So that can have an impact on everything. Energy drives the world, really. Alternative will take a while, to build up. Cost, where will the cost go? Everything, but particularly into transportation, everything about logistics might be impacted, because I believe the war, how far can it spread? What sea lanes will it impact? What ports will it impact? Many goods that move through Asia, the whole Asia that comes to the west, goes through the United Arab Emirates and several major transshipping hubs that are in that area. I think two of the world's largest transshipment hubs. I think one might be in Hong Kong or somewhere in Asia, and one is in one of the Arab Emirates states. So that can impact nearly the movement of almost any good that is coming from that half of the world, from the entire East Asia side. So that's one impact there on energy, logistics, and transportation costs on our local market. If the war continues, with certainly as powerful as the US is, we're not sure how it might impact their economy and then how it off-spin into our economy. We trade upward of 62% of our imports come from the US. 56% of our export goes to the US. Remittances, tourism, you just think of it, where it can be heavily impacted significantly.
But when we look at the stock market, so we know that there is going to be a ripple effect here in the Caribbean. We look at oil prices, we look at, like you mentioned, transshipment costs. Basically, everything is affected. But when we look specifically on the stock market, what could potentially be that correlation? Like what stocks would be affected?
Okay, certainly energy. Let's look at our transportation companies, Knutsford Express. Let's look on our tourism potential, and how is tourism impacted? Of course, cost might go up, yeah. But if with all what is going on in the US and tariffs being imposed, and maybe oil prices and energy, the US market is very sensitive to these things, and that could impact someone's decision to travel to Jamaica to take a vacation in the next year or two. And a good majority of our tourists come from the US and Canada also, so those could be impacted. On our market, we talk about D-Cove and express catering. Movement to the airports will impact express catering. In terms of remittances, we can talk about GK. Remittance makes up a good bulk of their revenue put through other financial entities. In the short term, in terms of energy, we might see positively maybe an innovative energy impacted, but the price may go up. No, that is the stock price. But in terms of revenue, that is a medium to long-term prospect, because they would have to build out their facility as alternative energy solutions. So we could say MPCCEL, innovative energy, in the long term may be potentially benefiting from it. In the short term prices, the market may see prices as potentially good. But that's temporary. If they are unable to build out the revenue side in the medium to long term, there might be a loss in the market there. So we're looking at that. We talk about We spoke to Energy, Regency, Fesco. We look at just the negative side because these are hard petroleum-based import, gasoline type products. We talk about, the potential. We look at Innovative Energy, MPCL. We talk about the financial company. We talk about tourism like a Cove and any related tourism related. We talk about remittances also coming through. So all these things can be impacted, and the American market is far more sensitive to these things than we are. So the impact could be indirect but significant.
Yeah, I noticed, let me bring David back in here. I noticed in the United States, gas prices went up quite a bit in the past week. But then locally, we haven't had as dramatic an increase. We had a fairly small increase. So we've kind of been spared the full effect of what global gas prices are doing so far. But David, looking ahead, what are some of the things that we should be watching closely to know whether this crisis will deepen or if it's going to begin to ease, especially for smaller economies like those of us in the Caribbean?
So let me just get a little bit of context with respect to the fuel price adjustments. So I'll take the simple example. So Petroleum, main refinery, main, distributor or provider of fuel inputs that are sold to the general population. Yeah, it's 70, 90, your kerosene, your diesel. Every Wednesday, Petroleum announces updates to its prices, which are updated really for the Thursday date, right? So for the last 2 weeks, we've seen 90 diesel, ultra low sulfur diesel, go up $4.50 for 2 consecutive weeks. And the prior week, I believe it was $3.87 or $3 something plus $3.50 that the 87 fuel price adjusted by. So Petroleum has a mechanism whereby in that pricing mechanism, fuel prices don't go up or down by more than $4.50 in any single week. So while we've not seen the full brunt of the impact as yet in the first 2 weeks of this situation, it is coming because last week all 4 major pricing inputs for petroleum went by $4.50. And I wouldn't be surprised tomorrow if we're seeing 87.90 and everything else going by $4.50 again. So there is that delayed impact in terms of when we feel it. And Petroleum explained that when prices start to come down, they can't really drop prices quickly as either because they have to recover from some of the losses that they're absorbing by slowly adjusting prices upwards to the regular consumer. So first of all, about $9 in the last 2 weeks, but that full 30-50% price spike that we've seen in the last month, that's not going to us all at once. It's going to incrementally go up if prices remain this elevated, especially going into the May and June deliveries. With respect to the stock market and just the broader perspective, so we've seen Fesco going from $3.50 last week to as high as $4.80 this week. So for some people, they made as much as 40% in less than a week. And for other people, it was based on Fesco's good results, but also based on, what I'd call the perspective of they're going to be reporting higher figures or earnings because they maintain a certain margin spread on fuel sold to the consumer or to the dealers. So in their case, they're going to report higher earnings. And we've also seen West Indies Petroleum terminal go from the $10 region to $11 region, or Regency Petroleum from the $4 region to the $5 peak. So you're seeing these 3 relatively connected energy stocks, go up considerably. With respect to the energy companies, which are like renewable energy, I should say, Wigton and Innovative Energy Group, those 2 firms, are somewhat pushing in terms of expanding their contribution to national grid. So we've seen whereby Wigton is going to work on deploying 70 megawatts worth of solar power over the next 2 years. Innovative Energy Group is also going to try and push for these renewable energy request proposals. And we saw that the government was announced and actually is going to have 220 megawatts, I think, of renewable energy request proposal going forward. So IEG gets that contract, it does get an opportunity to grow and scale the business further and get a stable income or revenue from whoever is the main national utility provider over the next 2 years. But to keep it broad, to keep it simple, it's going to be a pretty interesting situation for the market because remember, when Melissa initially hit within the first 1 to 2 weeks, you saw a lot of selling on different stocks. You saw the TJ from $4.20 to $4.90 to $4.80, and you just saw people selling to get cash. While you've seen several, stocks go up in the last 3 months since then based on results and just market sentiment, if persons are feeling the pinch in their pockets, you're going to see more selling pressure to raise cash. And if you look at some stocks in recent times, there are not as many buyers for some stocks. So if somebody needs to raise cash quickly, you're going to see prices fall a lot more precipitously just because the supply is greater than the demand or persons willing to purchase. So I'll take another question from Khalil about really and truly, it's not a comfortable period because discretionary spending is going to get further compressed when it comes on to the tourism side. When it comes on to like your Lasco Financial, your GK and other FX players, in terms of Cambio players, it's going to hit them in the sense that most of our foreign income comes to the country, 74% comes from the tourism and productive sector. Traffic to Sanctuary International was on 35% for last month. So while it's a benefit in a sense for the banks, who can get a better spread on their FX that they buy and sell, it's going to be tough for different companies in different segments. So it is a very stratified and differentiated situation from this Iran crisis, which is going to hit us directly by your fuel prices and also indirectly in terms of throughput in terms of business to Jamaica.
Let me have some comments from the audience because they've been weighing in on all of this. Javon says, Clive, the man himself to save the day. Do you think this may be the war of the century and that we may be affected more than we are foreseeing?
Well, the longer it goes on is the worse it can get. That's one. But interestingly, how wars start is another thing. It seemed to be a bit frivolous this time around. Mr. Trump and the way he speaks, Hegseth, if you just listen to them over the last several months, changing the from the Department of War. The threat is already on Cuba. The threat is already in Central America and Latin America. Now, the question is, and this is a discussion we've been having at work. Initially, 4 years ago, I'd have thought Trump is just exaggerated in his narratives, etc. But the man has shown us that he will take action because he believes he can take action. So the longer this Iran war continues, maybe it will put America in a space where, they can calm down the rhetoric, at least locally, because they need to build relations locally to strengthen back their economy. But if it continues in the area, that's a potential hotspot. It could spread, and it could be worse for the world, and for all economies. So I can't see any good coming out of this, neither in the short term nor the medium term. There's going to be a lot of rebuilding of trust, especially where trade is concerned. But in the much, much longer term, though, I think it will adjust the global economy and the global space. There's no doubt that many sovereign nations are rethinking their relationships right now. Europe is certainly, the European Union, not the military arm NATO, but the European Union is rethinking its relationship, I'm sure, with the United States. Even if Trump were to, maybe lose seats in Congress this coming election season, or if 3 years' time lose a presidency. We're not sure what permanency has set in how the United States is governed. We don't know what type of mindset he has influenced now on both sides on how they will relate to their neighbors and the rest of the world. So there are still some questions there and how the world will move on from here. But as interesting, the point was made that prices are sticky downward, especially a product that is complement and supplement the every economic space, that is energy, oil. From this oil comes the distillation process of oil. Probably about 8 is said, essential products, including asphalt. We're talking about infrastructural development and build out. We're talking about Jamaica, who needs to build back roads and housing solutions, right? That comes from this product. Look at the science of it. So some significant resources are going to be impacted permanently. Prices are sticky downward. We're going to bear the brunt of it, so it can only looks a little challenging going forward, especially for Jamaica, who is trying to rebuild from a devastating hurricane.
Yeah. So some more comments from the audience. So a lot of people weighing in. Roswell says major hardware stores that import tons of wood, the cost will be passed on to them, hardware stores, and then to us buyers. Basilio saying jet fuel will rise, higher plane tickets. You did mention the impact on tourism, Clive. Travis says the US, I feel it, things are get expensive right now. Kirk says airfare has gone up in the USA already. Levine says impact is loading, and that's a fact. And we got Philberg saying, bro, oil price have a go down. Midterms are upon us. Chill. Agreeing with that. And we have Balanta saying the US will not have such a dominant role in the Middle East after this war.
That is true. That is true. I think globally, the world was moving. It was adjusting its pace. BRICS, yes. But I think this has only accelerated it. Badness doesn't pay off. The Caribbean will now have to rethink our relationships. We have to rethink who we trade with. We have to look inward regionally. We have to rebuild CARICOM. We have to diversify our market space, who we import from, tourism, everything. We have to do that. And I think Trump has impressed upon us how urgent it is, even for Jamaica, to diversify the economic space. Yeah.
So I'll just add some quick notes, Kalila, because
yes, David.
So I know we're running out of time, but so in the Philippines, they've told their government employees work from home. In Sri Lanka, they're saying when there's day off, stay home. So in the Southeast Asian market, you're already seeing that impact in terms of how quickly that's be adjusting. Japan says they have 289 days of oil reserves. Australia is about 2-3 weeks worth of gas. And for those who don't know, like in the Philippines and some of those Southeast Asian countries, certain inputs that are used, to make ice cream come from those regions. So from that region, for the blue powers and other players, that need to use certain palm oils and other inputs. Those inputs come from Southeast Asia. So a crisis over there will slowly reverberate over here. And the thing is, why persons can say, hey, we'll look to other suppliers, the cost is going to be a major factor. And also, can you get the volume you need? Everybody else is going to be like, I'm going to the other guy now to get his supply or his, inventory to meet my product. So the impact is going to just trickle through slowly but surely. And don't forget, in the case of ice cream companies, they are a lot of energy to keep the ice cream and other cool goods cold. So I'm just pointing out that, the impact in the Asian space hasn't shown up immediately to the average person, still getting about their regular lives, buying ice cream, everything else. But these events, do take time to be processed over to our side of the world. But this impact is just something you have to look along the supply chain and see how it's going to cause that impact. Look backwards. Look at some of these companies. What did they produce? What is the main base that creates that product? Looking backwards to see how we're going to be affected. And, in this kind of environment, how are you going to adjust? Is it that you're going to be under the side hustle? Is it that you're going to be doing some job online? Are you going to trade US markets, Jamaican markets? Because the truth of the matter is, if everything gets more expensive, there's only how much you can cut in your overall expense or budget before you just have to find ways to earn more income. So as much as we're going to talk about higher prices, you have to earn more to offset the current situation. That's the only natural thing at this point.
All right. I'm going to leave it there for this evening. Thanks so much, David. Thanks, Clive.
Hi, Kalila.
We'll take our final break. Come back with your comments.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, was brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
The Money Mission Workbook is now available for sale on 7 Crave Marketplace for delivery island-wide. Order your copy now at 7cravemarketplace.com or moneymissionja.com or download the 7 Crave app. You'll get same day or next day delivery in Kingston or delivery within 2 to 3 business days island-wide. Let's get this money. Welcome back. Let's go to the comments. So, we did the whole show and I'm just noticing the camera lean. Anyway, okay, so I did say that I was going to come back to this comment from NanoSense. It said, after listening to you and John Mahfood on Nationwide this morning, I think you got it wrong on the NIR and how it's supposed to function. Why should the government put a cap on it? Explain. So I did get an opportunity after that interview to speak with Richard Biles about the role of the NIR and how that actually works. So for those of you who didn't hear that conversation, during that interview, we were discussing the budget debate and Favour Williams's presentation, opening budget presentation. She mentioned in that presentation that the NIR, the net international reserves, are at a very healthy $6.8 billion US, which represented something like, I think it was 30 something weeks of imports. Now, you may have heard this talk about the NIR and what a healthy level of NIR is. 12 weeks is the international benchmark. So John Mahfood, who is from, I think it's JMEA, so one of the groups, he suggested that, in fact, more than suggested, he seemed to feel very strongly about this, that the NIR should be capped at a certain level. He said, well, why are we continuing to build up these international reserves? If the international benchmark is 12 weeks, why do we have 30-something weeks? Why don't we stop building up the NIR and instead use that money to grow the economy, to build the country, to invest in infrastructure, for example? And he said it, and I agreed with him. I'm like, when you compare it to personal savings, for example, they always tell you that you need to have maybe 3 to 6 months of reserves. So money saved up for a rainy day, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And so in that context, I'm like, yeah, so once you have the 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved up, then what do you do after that? Do you just continue saving indefinitely? Do you continue building that emergency savings, or do you use the money for something else to start investing and start building your wealth? And so that was the comparison that I was making. But after the show, I spoke with BOJ Governor Richard Biles, and we had kind of an informal conversation about how the NIR works. And as he explained, it actually doesn't work that way. This was on WhatsApp, so let me bring up the conversation so that I can explain it, how he explained it to me. So I said, quick question, is there a target dollar amount for the NIR? I noticed Minister Williams says we're now at 36 weeks of imports, while the international benchmark is 12 weeks. At what point would the reserves be considered enough? So he said, well, we target at least 10% above 100% of the ARA. So he's getting very technical here. ARA stands for Assessing Reserve Adequacy, which is used by many multilateral organizations. Currently, we are at about 155%, to which I responded, so to be clear, you're saying 110% would be adequate? He said, yes. So way more than adequate. So I said, does that mean we can stop adding to the NIR now? Whose decision is that? He said, how do you stop adding to the reserves? Reserves are built by earning more FX than we spend as a country. Bear that in mind. So I said, couldn't that excess be reallocated after we have enough? He said, reallocated to what, to who, or what? I said, to the consolidated fund. So basically what I was saying just now, after you have enough, after you build up enough reserves, maybe it's time to stop putting money in the NIR. Not saying take it out and use it for something else, but once we have enough, could we just put the rest in the consolidated fund for other use? So, and then this is where he explained, okay, that's not quite how it works. He says, oh no, government has to first raise revenue and then buy foreign exchange to carry out any project. So I said, so the government would have to buy that money, that FX, that foreign exchange from you, the Bank of Jamaica? And he said, yes, short answer, yes. If government borrows internationally, they can either deposit it with us and draw on it when they wish, or they can sell it to us and get JMD. So what John Mahfood was suggesting and what I was agreeing with is not how the NIR works. So the reserves do continue to be built up, but it's not that it's money that is just going there for no reason. It actually comes out because how the NIR works is that it's built by earning more foreign exchange than we spend as a country. So it's basically a credit in this special account, so to speak. So I hope that answers your question or your comment. Nonsense. Let me take a few more before we go. Orville says, too big boss, this hot, referring to Clive and David over on the Analysts. Roswell says, two good analysts on the program. Roswell commenting on Woodcats, saying, I see some person selling at 93 cents on Woodcats. Roxy saying, good analysis on the program. Lovely, thank you. Ryan commenting on Woodcats again, saying it started off slow in my opinion. It made 11 cents, closing day trading at 101. 25 million units traded, so it was very liquid today. I'm optimistic about seeing how it performs later. And I think we're going to leave it there for this evening. Yeah, we're going to leave it there for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us yet another week here on Taking Stock. My pleasure hosting you. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share with a friend, let everybody know that this is the place where the Caribbean comes to talk business. Did I just make up a new slogan for the show? Let's make it cool to talk about money. I'm a slogan queen now. Let's get this money. Let's make it cool. Investing is the new sexy, where the Caribbean comes to talk business. I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll here. Thanks so much to the hardworking production team led by the ladies Sashel Williams and Izzy Ramsey. Who else do I need to big up? You for tuning in every single week. Remember to subscribe to the newsletter at getmoneynews.com. That's getmoneynews.com. I'm Kalila. See you again next week.